Me and Melvin Combs were good friends. We did a lot of business together. Of course, it was not a legal business, but we did a lot of business together.
My father, he was when I was 3 years old. I don't have like a lot of memories of my father. You know, they say, you know, you can't miss something you never had. So that's only a little ways right, you know. There's definitely been times as I've gotten older that I've missed my father.
The feds just unsealed some new files on Diddy's late dad, Melvin Combs. And it turns out his connection to the notorious kingpin Frank Lucas goes deeper than we thought. Back in the early 70s in Harlem, Frank Lucas was running one of the most dangerous and profitable heroin rings in the country. But Lucas didn't just dominate the narcotics game, he also had law enforcement in his pocket and ties with high-level criminals, making him practically untouchable until he wasn't. And guess who was right in the middle of all of this? None other than Diddy's father, Melvin Combs. Melvin was allegedly helping Lucas manage the flow of illegal substances through New York. But word on the street is that Melvin eventually started cooperating with the feds and snitching on his own crew. And you know, in that world, snitching isn't just frowned down upon, it's a death sentence. And in 1972, that sentence came down hard. Melvin Combs was when Diddy was just 3 years old, and the perpetrators were supposedly the same people he tried to snitch on. Now here's where it gets wild. After Melvin's death, Diddy was raised by his mother Janice, who actually lied to him about who his father was and told him that Melvin died in a car accident. In fact, it wasn't until Diddy was in college that he finally found out the truth about his dad. Diddy actually shared during his commencement speech at Howard University in 2014 that he only found out the truth when he looked up his dad's name in the school's library after he started his studies there.
My world was changed here at Howard. On my second day of school, I learned something that would change the course of my life forever. I don't talk about this often. I was raised by a single mother in Harlem. My dad, Mr. Melvin Combs, died when I was 3 years old. My mother always told me that he died in a car accident. But something about that, it just didn't feel right. Something was in my soul that was telling me otherwise. So as soon as I got here, I went to the library and I did some research. I used the microfilm at Founders to search through all the newspapers. And when I typed in my father's name and the day he died, I read in the Amsterdam News that he had been and a deal going bad. Right there in that library, I realized there's nothing greater than a mother's love and desire to protect her child. Nothing. I also decided that I would live my life in a way to make her proud. I decided to embrace the entrepreneurial spirit of my father, but in an honest way. God bless you, Melvin Combs. I could feel you right next to me. But in an honest way, in a legal way, by earning, scraping, working harder, believing in myself, and most importantly, making the most of the blessings that God blessed me with.
Now, Diddy honored his father's so-called legacy in more than one way. See, despite all types of serious allegations following him since the 90s, Diddy always walked away clean from any legal trouble. And according to these newly unsealed files, this is because Diddy may have kept that immunity by following his dad's playbook, working with law enforcement as an informant. On top of that, the streets are saying that Diddy kept Frank Lucas's network of criminal connections close, while at the same time making friends with people in high places. And if these files are anything to go by, Diddy kept himself untouchable for almost 3 decades by playing both sides. Just enough of the criminal world to stay on top and just enough law enforcement ties to keep his freedom. This story runs deep, so stay tuned because there's a lot more to unpack about Melvin Combs and his legacy.
Okay, so.
And I know Melvin used to come to your club, the turntable, a lot.
Yes, he did. He come there all the time. Melvin was like a lady man. Yeah, he come there all the time. He come to my club all the time. Yes, he did.
With Diddy's RICO trial approaching, people are starting to look back at some of his old comments with fresh eyes and questioning if he's been hiding in plain sight this whole time. And one clip that's got everyone talking again is an interview where Diddy opens up about his father Melvin Combs' criminal past. Now, rumors have long claimed that Melvin worked under infamous Harlem mobsters like Frank Lucas and Nicky Barnes. But Diddy told the interviewer that his father didn't work for those guys. According to Diddy, he was actually on their level and a kingpin in his own right. Diddy claimed that Melvin had his own crew and ran things independently, just like Lucas and Barnes.
Can we talk about your dad? I mean, because that's the other big death that impacts your life. You didn't know him that well, and then you find out that he was a big Harlem hustler, worked for Frank Lucas, one of the legendary Harlem hustlers.
Yeah, no, my father never worked for Frank Lucas. Like, they had their own individual crews.
Okay.
Nicky, he didn't work for Nicky Barnes. The only person that was, bigger than them, or as big as them was my father. And now that's not something I glorify or proud of.
But he was in Harlem.
I mean, he was in Harlem and he was doing his thing, selling narcotics, and we all know what that gets you. That's only going to have you end up in jail or dead. But it is the reason why, I didn't follow in those footsteps, because.
But you are like him.
Yeah, I'm definitely like him, but I'm just doing it in a legal way.
Now, you can't trust anything that comes out of Diddy's mouth. I mean, in that same interview, Diddy claimed he found out about his father's true identity when he saw an article about how his mom dressed him in real fur to attend Melvin's funeral, and he said that this is how he found out about where his family's decadent lifestyle came from.
And my mother wasn't telling me. I found out, this before the internet, and I had looked up my father's name, and I saw an article about my mother wearing a full-length chinchilla to a funeral and taking me, and I was in a mink, and that was like the story of just the glamour and like the decadence of our family, and just how he was the kingpin, of Harlem, and how he had got assassinated.
So Diddy claimed his dad was a kingpin, and that was why his family lived in luxury. But in that Howard commencement speech, Diddy claimed his mom had to work 4 jobs to make ends meet and afford his college tuition.
See, I got that work ethic from my mother. My mother worked 4 jobs to take care of me and my sister Keisha. My mother worked 4 jobs to send me to Howard University. So I want to take the time out and say, Mama, I love you so much. I wouldn't be standing up here without you. Thank you so much for all your sacrifices. And thank you to all the other mothers out there. I love you, Mom.
So yeah, Diddy has been lying through his teeth since day one, and we really can't take his interviews as a reliable source. What's also interesting is that in that same interview, when he was asked if people know the real Sean Combs, Diddy immediately responded, no, adding that that's by design.
Do you think that people really know you?
No, people don't really know me, and that's by design.
Now check out Diddy's response when asked who the real Sean Combs is.
Who is this person, the Sean Combs, that we don't know?
We have yet to find out.
Right.
You have to come along for the ride. You have to come. I mean, that's the whole part of the journey. That's the whole part of entertainment. I mean, you don't rock with a brother for like going on 20 years and stop now. You got to see this movie all the way through, baby.
Well, the movie is over now, and it's not a happy ending for Diddy. The same way it wasn't a happy ending for his dad Melvin, who got by his own people for snitching. And get this, Diddy's former bodyguard Gene Deal claimed years ago that Diddy almost ended up meeting the same fate as his dad. Gene claimed the night Biggie Smalls was in March 1997, Diddy knew that people in LA were actually after him and not Biggie. But Diddy ignored Gene's warnings and pretty much set Biggie up. And according to Gene, Biggie wasn't the only person Diddy betrayed. In fact, Gene said that Diddy's been a rat his whole life and would have died that night like a snitch the same way his father did. Now, as for Frank Lucas, he passed away of natural causes in 2019 at the age of 88. And one of his interviews with Vlad TV recently resurfaced, where he talks about his friendship with Melvin Combs and the business they did together.
I'm Ray Lucas. This is my dad, Frank Lucas, and shout out to Vlad TV. Thanks for setting up this interview.
Me and Melvin Coles were good friends. We did a lot of business together. Of course, it was not a legal business, but we did a lot of business together. And I was sorry to see what happened to him. The hell out of me. And the guy who did it, I'm glad he got what he got. Okay, so.
And I know Melvin used to come to your club, the turntable, a lot. Can you talk about
Yes, he did. He come there all the time. Melvin was like a lady man. Yeah, he come there all the time. He come to my club all the time. Yes, he did.
Can you say the name of your club?
The Lord Price Turntable, 52nd and Broadway. I met Sean Combs. I met him when he was a little boy. He used to come over to my house. His daddy used to bring him over to my house. He used to come see me on various businesses, and he used to bring him over to my house from time to time. But I met Sean about a year ago. It's been a little better than a year ago. He heard I know the father, and he wanted me to tell him about the father, so I come over there and I told him something about the father, but I didn't give him the whole story because he didn't press me. He just asked me casual, and I told him casual, but if he pressed me, I would have told him the whole story.
About his dad?
Yeah, well, all I know, but I didn't do that because he didn't press it. If he act like he really wanted to know, he act like it was just another thing, so I had to go.
Right, and you knew him as Sean Combs, not as Puffy or P. Diddy, right?
No, I know him Melvin's son. I didn't know his name. I know Melvin's son. I didn't know his name.
As for Lucas's criminal history, this man was pure evil. To give you just one example, one of his methods of smuggling illegal substances into the United States was hiding them in the coffins and bodies of dead American soldiers who served in Vietnam.
In the late 1960s, Frank Lucas, a notorious kingpin, orchestrated an audacious plan to smuggle heroin directly from Vietnam. During the Vietnam War, Lucas leveraged military connections and a network of corrupt officials, creating a direct supply chain. He worked with Leslie Ike Atkinson, a U.S. Army sergeant stationed in Southeast Asia. Using American military flights, they hid inside the coffins and even inside the bodies of deceased soldiers, ensuring a steady, undetectable stream of to the U.S. This ingenious yet sinister method, known as the cadaver connection, revolutionized the trade, flooding American streets with pure, uncut. Lucas's operation epitomized corruption and exploitation during a tumultuous era, ultimately leading to his downfall and capturing the imagination of both law enforcement and Hollywood alike.
Frank Lucas was convicted in 1976 on federal and state charges and sentenced to 70 years in prison, but he became an informant and served only 5 years. Lucas was placed in the witness protection program with his family, and his life of crime inspired the movie American Gangster, starring Denzel Washington as Lucas.
And as the story tells us, he took the bold choice of going to Thailand, going to Vietnam, and finding his own source. In those days, as the story is told, sold for $50,000, $60,000 a kilo at 50% purity, 60% pure. He found it 100% pure for $4,200 a kilo. It was sold on the street at about 2% pure. So you can do the math. He made an incredible amount of money. At one point, he was making about $1 million a day himself.
How would you get it into the States?
You ain't got to worry about that.
Who do you work for in there?
You ain't got to worry about that either.
Who are you really?
Frank Lucas says it right there in my passport.
I mean, who you represent.
Me.
You think you're going to take 100 kilos of into the U.S. and you don't work for anyone? Someone is going to allow that?
That's right.
After this first purchase, if you're not by Marseille importers or their people in the States, then what?
Then there'll be more, much more, I guarantee it. And if it's all the same to you, I don't have to drag my no more.
Of course not.
My man.
So, brother, huh?
So when you start piecing together Diddy's family history, things really start to add up. His dad, Melvin, worked side by side with the notorious Frank Lucas and eventually flipped to become a federal informant. And then his mom, Janice, was allegedly involved in her own shady dealings with rumors of running setups involving young women. So it's no wonder Diddy turned out the way he did. Now, of course, this doesn't excuse Diddy's actions at all, but it gives you an idea of the kind of world he grew up in. And it also explains why he was able to walk through controversy after controversy like he was untouchable. But there might be another reason why Diddy allegedly managed to get away with all types of crimes for all these years. But this story just keeps getting crazier the deeper we go. And now, on top of all this, word on the street is that some newly unsealed FBI documents are hinting that Diddy might have been working with the feds all along, just like his father. And if that's true, it might explain how Diddy's been able to slide out of every scandal unscathed. So according to these documents, when Melvin flipped to become an informant, this wasn't some light snitching. Melvin was allegedly giving up intel on on major players from the street criminals to politicians. But here's where things get even messier. These files suggest that when Melvin died, his connections with the feds didn't just disappear. They were allegedly passed down to Diddy. So you have Diddy coming up in the industry and finding himself in all kinds of wild situations, from the 1999 nightclub to other incidents that would have ended anyone else's career. And somehow, every time he just walked away with no consequences. So it makes you wonder if Melvin's Fed connections were Diddy's golden ticket to staying one step ahead. But we're not done yet. There's also talk about Diddy's connections allegedly going way deeper than just helping him stay out of trouble. If the rumors are true, Diddy was running an elaborate blackmail operation allegedly financed by some elite circles. Now, what type of elite circles am I talking about? Well, there's a whole different rabbit hole where things get really dark. Let's just say that the same people Jeffrey Epstein was allegedly working for are the ones who enabled and funded Diddy's blackmail ring.
So here we go. Epstein was rumored to be associated with intelligence to U.S. journalists Dylan Howard, Melissa Cronin, and James Robertson linked Epstein to the Israeli Mossad in their book Epstein, Dead Men Tell No Tales. They relied for the most part of the former Israeli intelligence officer Ari Ben Menashe. According to him, Epstein's activities as a spy served to gather compromising material on powerful people in order to blackmail them. There's also possible connection to the Mossad via Ghislaine Maxwell, whose father, Robert Maxwell, is said to have had contacts with the Mossad. Epstein's victim, Virginia Giuffre, also alleged Epstein to be an intelligence asset, linking on Twitter to a Reddit page that alleged Epstein being a spy running a blackmail operation.
So according to internet detectives, Diddy was doing pretty much the same thing as Epstein, only in the hip-hop world.
In order to understand this lawsuit against P. Diddy, you need to understand the history of blackmail. A lot of people in the comments are misunderstanding why rap music is so anti-gay. And a lot of people understand the ties of Israel and the Mossad by Epstein, but a lot of people don't realize the ties of blackmail back to the invention of sexual blackmail and the Jewish mob. So if you don't know what's going on, Diddy, one of the most influential people in the rap industry over the last 30 years, just got served this court case that alleged all kinds of crimes, including especially having all of his homes wired with cameras and hosting parties with underage girls, rappers, label executives, celebrities, politicians, and collecting on tons of important people. Like, we're talking Jeffrey Epstein level of operation, but in the music and entertainment industries. But the thing about a court case is that we're only getting the allegations that are in that case, and they're only relevant to what that defendant saw and experienced. And so the bigger picture is not filled in directly. You have to kind of understand the history of this stuff and what each thing might imply about the bigger picture. And that requires an understanding of the history of this stuff. And it's not complicated, and it's a wild story. So, the FBI was founded by J. Edgar Hoover. He actually was the head of the Bureau of Investigation, the BOI, before the FBI was even invented back in the 20s. And he served there for 11 years. Then they invented the FBI, and he served as the head of the FBI for 37 years, totaling 48 years leading what was more or less the FBI. So we're talking like all the way from like the Great Depression through World War II into like the 60s. Like through the 60s music revolution into the 70s. All of that time period, the FBI was led by the same person, and he was one of the most corrupt government officials in all of US history. And understanding the state of organized crime and of law enforcement in America is impossible if you don't know about J. Edgar Hoover. And understanding the nature of sexual blackmail is impossible if you don't know about Meyer Lansky, who was a boss in the Jewish mob back in the 30s, 20s, like the Prohibition days and so on. Meyer Lansky, this Jewish mob boss, basically invented the concept of blackmail. And he did it blackmailing J. Edgar Hoover, the guy who was explicitly supposed to be taking guys like Meyer Lansky down. The Wikipedia articles are sanitized, but basically Meyer Lansky had a photo of J. Edgar Hoover using his mouth on his main assistant, Clyde Tolson. Realistically, it was his boyfriend. They were a couple. But then, once Hoover was blackmailed, he was like, how much worse could it get? And so he started hosting blackmail parties in collusion with these mobsters and inviting all sorts of important people to these blackmail parties to collect his own blackmail. This all happened in what was called the Blue Suite at the Plaza Hotel. And it was basically a bunch of male cross-dressing orgies all caught on camera for like a decade or more. And because Hoover was already blackmailed by the most powerful gangsters in the world, like, he didn't give a, he just went and hosted them, and everybody got blackmail on everybody. So back to our boy Diddy, who founded his record label when he was only 24 years old, became one of the most successful record labels of the time. He was able to do that because he was financed and supported by his mentor, who just happens to be gay and rich and Jewish, just like Meyer Lansky was. And at the time, he was one of the most influential men in the music industry. He managed all kinds of the biggest name artists that you've ever heard of. And he found this guy, Diddy, on the up and up in one of his companies, who we now know from this lawsuit and the other lawsuit filed by his ex-girlfriend Cassie, which is horrific, disgusting, not a good read. We know that Diddy has some real effed up proclivities, as well as just generally probably being at least gay or bi, one of the two. So this guy with questionable morals, questionable habits, and ready to go crazy whatever. Like, he's willing to launder money. He's willing to do crazy drugs. He's willing to do basically anything. This is just me speculating on his motivations, but mentor Diddy brought him up and elevated him to a record executive by helping him found his label, Bad Boy Records. That was he did that. And then Diddy, along with a lot of help from a lot of other people all around him, proceeded to do 30 years worth of blackmail operations within the rap industry and promoted artists that seem to have been ensnared in it, like Usher, for example, like Meek Mills. Hell, even Justin Bieber is like directly in this storyline. And so what you wind up with is a rap industry, a music industry that is full of people that are creating the types of music that the people above them, that the people that hire them, that the people that manage them want them to make. They're all terrified of stepping on the wrong toes or getting out of line or doing what they're not supposed to for one blackmail reason or the other.
So if even half of this is true, Diddy's got a whole network of connections that run way deeper than anyone thought. We're not just talking about hip hop or business. It's the kind of influence that could reach the highest levels. But the real question is, will the public ever get the full story on Diddy's connections? Because look, it's been 5 years since Epstein died, and we still don't have the names of his clients. So now I want to hear from you. What do you think about these allegations that Diddy's been using his father's legacy and his own secret connections to stay on top? And how deep do you think this rabbit hole actually goes? I need all your takes and theories in the comments below. And make sure you don't miss out on this next video.